This is one of their mobile kitchens that they actually...
Is that even some, what I call habitual...
Beautiful Stop and Shop in the Wilton. Penalty, but it was actually a tax, and that it... Absolutely. What's the name of the show? Good evening and welcome once again to the Marty Heiser Show. I'm so glad you've joined us. It's a cold, raw evening. There's really nothing else to do. And you know, this television show comes to you absolutely free of charge. You don't have to pay. You don't have to buy a subscription. We're coming right into your living room, bedroom, basement, wherever you watch TV, and we're coming to you free of charge. A couple things that I know are foremost on your mind. One, the Chicago Blackhawks are on the verge of making history. They are gone 19-0. They've won 19 straight games. Although in the NHL, they have this thing where if you tie, you go into overtime, and if you win in overtime, it's still a win, but you get 1 point for the tie. Regardless, they haven't lost a hockey game in 19 games. Chicago Blackhawks, they're playing tonight against the St. Louis Blues. TiVo that show, watch this show, you can see it all at the end. But hats off to the Chicago Blackhawks. I have to say hats off to my son, Jason. Some of you saw the show where we climbed this mountain. He graduated from the Navy EOD school this past weekend. That's why Dave Strait, our Dynamite co-host and producer of the Marty Heiser Show, was the guest host last week, but he's back in the control room and I'm out here, and that's that. One last thought on sea crustacean. It sounds like some sort of, I don't know, marine animal that sticks to the bottom of a boat or something like that. Basically what this comes down to is we're asking the federal government to live with 2% less income. 2%. By show of hands, how many people through the recession have had to tighten their belt by 2 measly percent, say over the last, I'm seeing hands going up everywhere. 2%. Quit your whining, suck it up, look at your billion-dollar budgets, and cut 2%. And stop your whining. You're not going to release prisoners or have battleships go home or planes won't fly. You can work it out. You're all really bright guys. Just get it done. Everyone else has had to tighten their belt. You need to tighten your belt too. That's all I got to say on that. Now, from the world of politics, we're moving to a fascinating show tonight because I am surrounded by interesting people that have incredible stories to tell about what they're doing. The first group of people is involved with an organization called World Relief. I just want to open it up with their manifesto. I hope you're running some tape on this because this is good. World Relief's manifesto. There is too much suffering in our world. Every hundreds of thousands of victims are forced to flee their homes. Everyday poverty prevents hundreds of millions of people from meeting basic needs. Get this, every 3.6 seconds, someone dies from hunger. While many are heroically doing something, God longs for the broadest, most diverse social network on the planet. And this network that World Relief works through is the Church of Jesus Christ. To rise up like never before and to engage in the great cause of our time, to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to house the homeless, and to meet the needs of our neighbors. That's the manifesto of World Relief, and I am so privileged to have with us this evening James Minster, Director of Church Engagement, as well as my new best friend in the world, Emmanuel, and Cyprian, who is the African Church Partnership Director. First of all, I want to welcome you to the set and thank you for coming from very far away to enlighten us on what World Relief is and what you're doing. Why don't I start with you? How did you get involved with World Relief and what do you see it doing, especially in the Congo and in Africa and some of these countries?
Yeah, thanks, Marty, for having us. Before working for World Relief, I was a pastor at two churches, McLean Bible Church in Washington, D.C. and Wheaton Bible Church in the Chicago suburbs. I know you're a Wheaton graduate, so you're pretty...
Some have called it the Evangelical Vatican.
Something like that.
It's beautiful. Okay, yeah.
Missions pastor at both of those churches, and as you mentioned, World Relief is passionate about working through local churches. So at those 2 churches, I coordinated and organized partnerships between those churches and World Relief in Burundi and in Kenya.
I just want to touch on something real quick because you kind of glossed over it. World Reliefs, their whole network, their whole plan is to work through the local church. I think that's big.
It's
I mean,
huge.
You're not talking about, you know, taking a relief ship, drop shipping a bunch of wheat somewhere and saying good luck. It's more comprehensive. How does that work?
Yeah, the local church is the largest grassroots network on the planet. And if you think of it in these terms, there are over 1 billion people involved in the local church. Everybody's talking about the Pope resigning today. Just in the Catholic Church, there are 1.2 billion people.
Wow.
If you include the evangelical church in that, over 2 billion people. People living in global poverty are 2 billion people today as well. And if you pair up 1 to 1, the odds aren't bad that you'll be able to do something to actually relieve suffering in the world. World Relief believes that in order to address poverty, you need to deal with the underlying issues that affect the global poor. And the local church is the most poised to do that because every community, almost in the entire world, has a church within walking distance of it. So we're very pleased and happy to work through churches, to work with churches, to have partner churches in the U.S. And these 2 gentlemen are experts at working with local churches in the developing world to really reach and impact and train them so that they can be change agents in their community.
Well, Manuel, let me start with you. We had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. And on this set, we have a lot of different people that come through and talk about what being a Christian really is. We've had Olympic athletes. We've had very successful businessmen. We've had hip-hop artists, you know, guys that sing. And they all talk about this having a relationship with Christ. So you're not just a Christian because you were born into a Catholic family. But what's your story? How did you become a Christian? What's your story?
Well, I was at a school with a friend. He was reading a novel, and he kept talking to me about that novel.
What age were you at this point?
I was around 20.
20 years old.
20 years old.
Now, had you been raised in the church? Did you get up on Sunday and put your best clothes on?
Well, I went to church, but I was not a Christian.
Really? Because some people might think that, well, you know, if you get up, you're raised in a Christian home, you go to church on Sunday, that means you're a Christian. But what was your story?
I didn't have any relationship with Christ.
Oh.
So what happened is eventually he gave me that book, and I started reading it. This is a book called Exodus. It talks about the return of Israelites to Palestine. And the book is divided in 2 chapters, but there is a group of chapters that are divided in 2 parts. And each part of the book starts with a prophecy. So I read this book just as a novel, but by the time I was finishing it, I was thinking so much about prophecy that is fulfilled many years after it was given.
Yeah.
And so I was intrigued to read the Bible. I didn't get the big Bible, but I got the New Testament. So I started reading the New Testament. I started, just as I was reading the novel, I started reading Matthew, read through, read Mark, read through, and by the time I was starting Luke, the person of Jesus Christ and the story was no longer a story, but it was as if I was living that story.
Yes.
Huh.
Christ was no longer someone I was reading about, but it was as if I was living with him, and everything that was taking place was as if he was there.
Wow.
And so I read through Luke, and by the time I was in chapter 9, I came to that part which says, if anyone wants to follow me, he must deny himself, carry his cross every day, and follow me.
Okay.
It was as if he was talking to me. So I didn't know what to do, but in my mind I said, I don't understand what it means to deny myself. I don't understand what it means to carry my cross every day and follow him. But I said, whatever it means, I'm ready to do it.
Okay.
And then I continued to read the New Testament and finished it. And by the time I finished the New Testament, my life was totally changed.
Now, you seem to me like a well-educated man, not given to emotional, I saw Jesus or something like that. You seem very rational. You read the entire novel, but yet you had this encounter with Christ. You came to a position where you didn't have all the answers, but you surrendered your life to Christ, and you've never been the same since.
Yes.
Wow. And now you're working for World Relief. I happen to know that you're a medically trained technician. Could you make more money if you weren't working for a mission group like this?
Maybe.
So what's motivating you to be involved and try to live out this manifesto of World Relief?
Of course, I became a Christian before I was involved in medical field. So when I was in the medical field, I came to realize the issues that a person who is sick goes through. It's not just he has pain in his body, but he has a lot of thinking he has to do. He's thinking about his life. Right. If it is a man with a family, he's thinking about his family. There are so many things that are troubling him on top of his physical issues. So I was involved in an organization that, a Christian organization that trains medical field workers to evangelize medical field workers and train them how to do total patient care. So when I was involved with AIDS, I knew that it was more than just a medical program. Right. It was a life thing. And so I tried to link the church with these issues so that they can do holistic service to these people who are suffering in so many ways.
Wow. That's it. I mean, it's interesting because you can have these humanitarian gestures where you do things. Some people have made the analogy, it's like changing the deck chairs on the Titanic. You know, if all you do is try to straighten the medical issues, but you don't address the spiritual issues or some of the relational, it's not what you want to do. Okay, Cyprian. Now, we talked a little bit before, and you're doing some work in the Congo, and a lot has to do with these peace committees. Can you just tell us how that work is bears out?
Village peace committees. As a matter of background, the eastern part of Congo has been troubled for so many times. In 1990, 1993, 1996, 1998, 2000 and something. So every year we hear that at a given place there is a conflict.
Right. And it's just perpetual war. I mean, now sometimes in America we'll see these stories about children soldiers and things like that. Is this in the Congo as well?
Oh, these conflicts are caused by militias, which in most cases are based on tribes.
Okay.
Congo has more than 600 tribes.
Different tribes.
Different tribes. So in this part of the country, tribes hire militiamen to protect them, to fight for their interests, and so on. It has made the situation so terrible that people were displaced from their villages, and they had to live in camps for many years. But years after they came back into their villages, to find that it is no longer a community, but it is a torn apart society, whereby each ethnic group looks at the other as the enemy.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about the experience in the Congo. We talked about this earlier, the experience with apartheid in South Africa. And of course in Rwanda, where I know you have worked with World Relief. And by the way, if we had that website for World Relief, if you'd like to have more, if you're interested in what they're doing and how you might be involved, you can just contact the website. There it is, worldrelief.org is the website there. But we talked about a little bit where so many of these countries, because of the strife, first of all, you have the displacement, which creates a humanitarian problem, starvation, displaced families, orphanages, and so forth. But then you also have this desperate need for reconciliation. In Rwanda, in 1994, with the Hutu and the Tutsis, there was close to 800, maybe 900,000 people out of, how many was the population of Rwanda at the time?
I think it was around 8 or 9 million. And so you have 1 million people that, due to this strife, end up just tearing the country apart. Similar conflict in Congo. And you're trying to, if you will, bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to some of this. Allow, what did you call it? Not incarnational, but, dominion theology, where you have a sense of ownership of land. That's something different. What do you have to offer these people that have, in some cases, have shed blood between tribes, between families, and now they have to live in the same village? What do you say?
So difficult to bring the gospel to a whole community when a tribe is looking at the other as the enemy, actually chasing one tribe, hunting the other.
You might look at them and say, you killed my son, you raped my sister.
That's right, that's right. So the gospel that the church in the Congo is bringing to communities with the help of World Relief, of course, that is to help tribes to understand that the neighbor is the brother and the sister. It's an opportunity given to each and everyone to have somebody around with whom they build together a community.
Does this work?
So how village peace committees are working to actually reconcile people and to mediate conflicts is, let's say, a community of 3,000 people.
Right.
They elect among them from each tribe a representative.
Okay.
Now we have a committee of 10 maximum. These people sit to listen and to mediate conflicts that arise among them. There has been tremendous examples that we can cite. For example, at household level, whereby a woman and a wife and husband enter into conflict, and it is impossible to reconcile them.
Right.
Actually, the wife would love to poison the husband.
Really?
Yes, until
my wife sometimes makes coffee, and sometimes I wonder, because we'll argue about, what we're going to watch on TV, and sometimes, anyways, go ahead.
Well, so important that the people in conflict become like under the dominion of the evil one.
Okay.
So important that a village peace committee member who hears about that, who listens to the husband or to the wife, now calls the two together and listens to them.
And they can reconcile.
They do.
They do. There's forgiveness. They confess their sin and there's forgiveness.
It was observed that what they had lacked before was a hearing. Okay. But somebody who has a problem and has a person who will listen to him and who will be compassionate about his fate and will try to address this by bringing the two together, then it happens that people recognize, I am wrong. I was actually wrong. I was wronging you.
When you have this time of where people share openly, this is what I did wrong, I'm listening to the pain that I caused, and then they're able, through Christ, to forgive. Then from World Relief's point of view, you move on from there you said something about unified together, you know, we move together, because the ultimate goal for, and you can, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ultimate goal of World Relief is that classic, don't give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But they want to have development. They want to have these communities to be not only at peace, put away the war and the strife and heal some of the wounds like in Rwanda, but then move ahead with development. And are you part of that as well?
Now, village peace committees, after they have done their work, tribes reconcile, can walk the way together to address any problem they have, let's say, safe drinking water.
Yeah.
They have to drill a well somewhere or to build a house for a widow of any tribe and who is homeless. Tribes come together with their hands and go cut trees. They make mud to just build walls for the house for such a widow.
Now we have some of the, it's interesting, if we can get a close-up, I guess I'll go to this camera. Yeah, James, why don't you walk us through, like this is one of the pictures we have of, I guess this is probably brick manufacturing in one of the communities here. And it seems like that's one of World Relief's goals is self-sustaining, micro loans, that sort of thing. What are we looking at here in this picture?
What we try to do with churches when we empower them isn't just to give them things. We try to get them to realize that they have natural resources, natural assets in their community, and they can leverage those to help create income-generating activities, to help develop their communities. So this is a church in Rwanda that realized that they have lots of mud. And a need that they had in Rwanda as they have rebuilt and are continuing to rebuild Rwanda is for bricks, and bricks are made from mud. And Rwanda does not have a shortage of mud and water. So this church decided that they were going to start making bricks and selling bricks as people began to build roads and to build houses in that community. So here's a church that was empowered by Cyprian and Ngoga, actually, and they weren't coming to World Relief for a handout. They were coming to World Relief saying, teach us to use what we already have so that we can build up our communities and we can reach our neighbors. So this church is doing quite well right now, selling bricks to the neighboring communities.
Now, just out of curiosity, where are the men? Because I see a lot of women building bricks here. Where the heck are the men? What's up with that, Cyprio? What's going on where the men don't do any of the work?
Well, it happens though that normally women are the forgotten section of our society when it comes to valuing people, but also involving them in socio-economic building. In many cases, such things will involve women, while the men are in fields or doing other things.
Watching soccer on
building
TV
houses,
drinking beer and
building houses or doing other things.
I'm just kidding.
We can't exclude that some of them will be even taking beer.
Yes, well,
for sure.
It's very hot content.
You know, women.
Okay, now what do we have here? Now we had Nancy Green, who is one of the instrumental parts of development for World Relief. But Nancy Green, unfortunately, couldn't join us on set today. Has to do with her agent did not allow the contract to go through. But this is something that she was involved with. What do we have here?
Yeah, this is a group of 10 women from the U.S. who went to Eastern Congo, and they called themselves 10 for Congo. And they are with women in Congo who have been victims of gender-based violence. Basically, these women have been raped and brutalized because of the conflicts in Eastern Congo.
So many families were broken up in these war-torn countries where you no longer have a father or a husband at home to protect. And then women, my understanding is they'll sometimes have to walk long distances to get water, and rape is a real problem.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 women in Eastern Congo, they say, have been raped. Well, this group of women from the U.S. went along with Cyprian, who oversees our gender-based violence program, and they decided that they were going to listen to these women so that they could tell their stories. And just by being able to tell their stories, these women have said, we feel human again, because the villages have ostracized them. Then what this group of women did that was really unique is they came back to the U.S., and what they're trying to do right now is they're trying to get 10 churches from the U.S. to partner with Cyprian, with Ngoga, and with World Relief in Congo. So 10 church partners for Congo, so that we can institute more village peace committees, which helps to reduce the number of rapes in a community. Wow. So this group of women is active right now all over the U.S. trying to get 10 U.S. churches for Congo. And if you're interested, you can go to our website. Our contact information is on there. And if your church wants to partner in Congo, we would love to talk with you.
Website, right there. Okay, lightning round here, real quick. What is this? Yeah, we can get the close-up of that too. This smells very nice. But you talk about sustainable industries in Rwanda and so forth?
This is eucalyptus oil.
Okay.
And Rwanda is a great place to cultivate this and grow it.
I wish you could have scratch and sniff on television. Try that. Why don't you go to your television screen and scratch right here and see if you smell anything. This stuff is good. It'll clear your nostrils right out. Go ahead.
And this is a co-op that we formed. So women and orphans can come and they grow eucalyptus plants or geranium plants, and they distill the leaves into essential oils and sell it on the open market.
Okay, and you have things called microloans. This isn't huge multi-billion-dollar projects, but this is something very local. How does that work real quick?
Small loans, $25, $30, going to a group mostly of women in rural communities. They keep each other accountable, so we have a repayment rate of around 90 to 99%, depending on the community, and they invest it in entrepreneurial activities, so they can create income for their families and send their kids to school.
Once again, it's the women. I'm not just saying. It seems to be they're doing. Okay, just really quick, because we're about to wrap up. On these peace committees that you form, what is it? Together, we move. How does that work again?
So, village peace committees mean all tribes together.
Together, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we put aside their differences, don't take into account wrong suffered, don't let the sun go down on your anger, forgive your brother, that kind of thing.
And they bring all their hands together, and they say strengthen together.
And what's that word? Strength and together.
For those who speak Kinyarwanda, they say dukomezanye.
Okay, and what duka, and how's that go?
Dukome zanye.
Dukome zane.
Dukome zanye.
And together. Okay, now you told me not to bring it up, but you talked about this at a church in Buffalo, and you brought a peace committee to Buffalo. How did that work?
This was to give a testimony of what is happening in Congo. How churches of poor people coming together are operating, are doing some work that responds to the needs of the poor and the suffering.
See, I think I think all this reconciliation and peace, I think that the American church, the American culture has a lot to learn from you in the Congo and Rwanda as far as reconciliation and coming together and being, united.
Yeah, for sure in Buffalo it happened.
Look, if you can get those people in Buffalo to warm up and become united, I think that's a beautiful thing. World Relief, 2,500 staff working with 100,000 volunteers. You can't believe how much World Relief will take a donated dollar and stretch it. Because in some of these third world countries, they can just do miracles, even through things like this, little industries, bricks, coming together, women working together. 2,500 staff in 41 worldwide offices, 100,000 volunteers and growing, and they're reaching and working with over 4 million people. Not just coming and dumping rice on some dock and going away and adding it to a list saying we're doing it, but working intricately with the communities, working on reconciliation in war-torn countries, working on reconciliations within the church, between the churches. You should see in Rwanda, there wasn't all lovey-dovey. Working on reconciliation, and then from there, working towards development so these countries can be self-sustaining. World Relief, it is a profound organization, and if you want more information, just go to worldrelief.com. Jim, I want to thank you so much.
Thanks, Marty.
Good to see a Wheaton man doing good. And thank you so much for coming in. I'm so glad you read that novel and surrendered to Christ. And I'm so glad you straightened out Buffalo. I mean, I'd say there's another 25 cities in America, so you have to come back. Maybe next we'll fix Cleveland and then, work up to Chicago. But thank you so much for joining us, and hope to have you back.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Next up, we have a very interesting subject coming up. I am joined by Leslie LaBelle. That's right, LaBelle. And she is, I mean, if you ever want to have some very interesting reading, just Google Leslie LaBelle. She was educated at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. She was also a fellow in the Foreign Service Office, a political advisor to the commander of stabilization forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It causes me to get a headache just to even make that title. To get those people to reconcile would not be that easy. And she went to Swarthmore College. And when I think of Swarthmore, I think of like Wellesley and Smith and kind of a real hoity-toity sort of liberal Ivy League-esque atmosphere. And yet she has come out of that atmosphere clear thinking and has a clear understanding of what's going on. So I am so delighted to have Leslie LaBelle joining us.
Pleased to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, I want to start off with a picture that has become famous now and has sort of captured the plight of women around the world that live in societies under Sharia law. And this was on the cover of Time magazine. Hopefully we can get a close-up of this. But why don't you tell me what the story behind this beautiful girl who had her nose cut off, what was her violation? Her skirt was too high, or what was the problem here?
Excuse me, I don't think her skirt was too high. I don't know exactly what she did, but I will tell you that what happened was she did something that her family felt impugned their honor.
Ouch, okay.
And that is a very broad definition. And so this was the result.
And this happens all the time in some of these Muslim countries. Go ahead.
I should say one thing. The question of how women are treated, as you just heard from the previous segment, is not restricted to Muslims.
Okay.
And if you look, for example, at what's been going on in India, there's a real problem with rape that is finally being addressed. That is not a Muslim problem. So I don't mean to imply that all women's problems come from Islamic societies, but I think one can say with confidence that there are many Muslim societies where many women suffer terrible fates. And so what I want
is this somehow codified within Sharia law?
Okay.
The devaluing of women.
Let me talk a little bit about Sharia law. The Muslims expanded very rapidly during the life of Muhammad and afterwards. So the 7th century, starting in Arabia, they conquered a huge empire. And after about 100 years...
The caliphate or something like that?
The caliph is the one that came after Muhammad.
Okay.
So they had a huge area they conquered. Most of the people who lived there were not Muslims. So after about 100 years, they developed over a period of time a system of law which is known as Sharia law. And that's still 1,300 years later, it's still being used. So the reason I told you the history is that, first of all, a couple points to make. Sharia law is as much political as religious. It has portions that say, what do you have to do to be a good, devout Muslim?
Right.
You know, praying 5 times a day, giving charity, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's woven within the fiber of this, there's sort of some good stuff.
Yes,
I mean,
there are all the religious laws, many of which, if you look closely, will look familiar to you,
right.
Because it is a monotheistic religion related to Judaism and Christianity, and you will see things in it that you will agree with, obviously.
Yeah.
But it also aimed to provide an entire system of governing, which is very different.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that point earlier because
it's certainly different than the American point of view.
Well,
when we have freedom of religion, the government cannot in any way encroach on your expression of religion, but we sure as heck aren't going to have religious laws imposed on the greater public. I mean, you know, from a Christian point of view, we can say, well, yeah, adultery is really a bad thing. And we have a certain definition of marriage, and we have certain, you know, religious thinking about various issues. But that doesn't mean that it becomes the law of the land, that's for sure. You're good.
Doing myself in so you can't hear me.
Okay, no, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. That was the point I wanted to make about the U.S.
Yes.
I mean, we are a people who came together. Mm-hmm. We did a constitution. We have our own laws that we draw up. Mm-hmm. We fight about them. The laws pass. Some people are happy. Some people are unhappy. We had things we didn't like about the Constitution. We amended it more than 20 times.
Right.
But that's our law. And our law has very important principles that I think we can both agree are absolutely fundamental. Mm-hmm. It has a guarantee of freedom of religion, of freedom of speech.
Right.
It also has a separation of church and state.
Right.
Which means that if there is one religion, there's no way that the government is allowed to favor and promote that religion at the expense of other religions or people who don't want to be religious.
My understanding of the separation of church and state was not to protect the state from the church, but more protect the church from the state. In other words, the state can't come in and dictate the policies.
Well,
they actually tried to do that in Connecticut. There was some group in Hartford that tried to dictate the financial regulations of different Catholic parishes.
Right.
And it didn't go over too well. But anyways.
No, well, it's a multifaceted thing, but it also has meant that that people have a personal protection of freedom of religion.
Yeah.
It's not just a group that is a religious organization has protection. No, people have protection. So the reason I bring this up is that coming back to Sharia, as I said, 1,300 years, a huge empire, many different countries, many different cultures, many different centuries. So when you say, what is Sharia? You can look around the world and you'll see different variations. It's not all the same thing. However, when I started to read about it, I'm kind of self-educated on this. I discovered that there is a certain amount that's considered to be more or less agreed on. And there were certain kind of guidebooks to Sharia. And I just brought along one to show you. It's called Reliance of the Traveler.
Okay.
It's from the 14th century.
Right.
But this particular English translation has been approved recently by senior religious authorities in the Sunni Islamic world.
Husbands with more than one wife is not obligated to spend his nights with them in turns, but may keep away from them without sin. But he may not begin spending the night with one of them unless he chooses her by drawing lots. I don't know, if you get won or lost, it depends on your perspective. Hey, I do the shortest straw. I got to sleep with, okay. Whenever he spends the night with one wife, he is obliged to spend the night with the others. That's only fair. Giving equal time to each. I just happened to pick this. You know, when a husband intends to begin staying with his wives after an intermission or absence, the wife whose lot is drawn is the first with whom he spends the night. Very interesting. I guess they codified a lot of this stuff. But anyways, go ahead. Well, I just happened to pick that passage there. It's interesting.
Well, I use that if I'm talking about Sharia. I am not a Muslim. I don't speak Arabic. I was in the Foreign Service, but I never served in a Muslim country.
Right.
I don't have any
Listen,
pretense to be a specialist.
You're being very politically correct, and I admire that, and I think it's important. Yet you sent me some links, and I viewed those links, and I was appalled. And I'll tell you, I'll describe to the audience, because I don't think we have the technology to cue it up, unfortunately. But one of the links was in Tehran, Iran. And there were these Sharia police, these morality police, and there was some woman that wasn't properly burqa'd up, and they were ripping her out of the car, and they were going to do untoward harm to this lady. And everyone's just standing around going, oh, yep, she got what she deserved because she didn't have burqa. And she's screaming out. It's surreptitiously recorded. You can go to YouTube and see this yourself. And this is Sharia law, and this is what we're all supposed to acquiesce to under the title of tolerance? You know, I don't think so.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm sorry we can't show the
You have no
clip.
idea how sorry I am, too. But go ahead.
But the clip actually says something a little bit different from what you saw.
Uh-huh.
I saw.
Often the case. I
saw earlier clips that were, and I've seen other clips as you described with a hostile crowd. The ones in Tehran are different. Do you notice how the horns? The people started honking.
Yes.
The horns are honked in sympathy with the girl.
Well, I suppose that's good.
Well, the thing is, The earlier ones, when you watched a couple years ago, I watched something. You see the woman being hauled off, stuffed in the car, beat up, stuffed in the car, and hauled off. They didn't actually succeed in hauling away those girls.
Oh, really? Because the crowd
They were
intervened.
screaming. Well, the crowd didn't quite intervene, but the girl is screaming and she's fighting and she's making a big noise. And people, I noticed, you have to look closely. In one of them, there's a guy who's obviously part of this morality police.
Yeah.
He's pushing away the bystanders.
Yeah.
If he's pushing away the bystanders, he doesn't want them close, perhaps because they're on her side.
All right, well now let's up the ante a little bit, because, and this is all on YouTube too, you can go to jolly old England. And I guess there's the east side of England, there's Muslim Islamic communities, and they've got this like a morality police too. And they're going around to like women saying, hey, that your skirt's too low, or you can't drink over here, and they're like thugs. And this is in a free culture, and it doesn't reflect well on the mosques when these guys are doing it. Then you can double down on that, and they have this whole misogynistic approach to women where they'll take young girls, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, and they will groom them to have multiple sex partners within their community. And this is all okay, because I guess, someone wrote down in the book that this is okay. I mean, frankly, I was appalled at what I saw, and I thought that the men were behaving in a cowardly fashion, and I think it's just reprehensible. And then you come on this show and tell us that somehow Sharia is making encroachments into the United States of America under the guise of tolerance, and let's all get along and not be judgmental. Well, I, for one, am judgmental. I think it stinks. I think women should wear whatever clothes that they want to wear. And I think they should be in a car with whomever they want. And I think if they go out with different guys, they shouldn't have their nose cut off. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but this is still America. So where is Sharia making encroachments in the United States? I'm sorry I get wound up, but my psychologist says it's good for me to vent. But where are they making encroachments, and how can we squash this?
Well, you're asking me how to squash it.
I kind of threw that in there, but where's it raising its ugly head? And they're very anti-Israel, too.
Yes, yes.
But go ahead.
Remember I started talking about laws in the Constitution that are our laws that we drew up? As you pointed out, there are aspects of Sharia, regardless of whether it's a kinder, gentler version or the kind that you see in Iran and Saudi Arabia. There are basic, fundamental elements of it that are in contradiction to U.S. law. Mm-hmm. It does not have equality before the law. Mm-hmm. Muslims have more rights than non-Muslims. Men have more rights than women, period. Mm-hmm. And this is a big fat book. There are many, many different ways that this plays out. You can say, well, 1,300 years ago it was like that everywhere. That may be, but that was then and this is now.
Yeah.
And we live here.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who have done a survey. I'm talking about it from the point of view of law. That's just one way of looking at it. I'm looking at it from the point of view of law. See how many court cases have anything to do with Sharia in the United States. Now, your first response is probably that's impossible, because an American judge is using American law as his base of authority, right? His writ. Well, there's a study that got done by a center in Washington that looked up 50 cases that reached appellate courts in the states where Sharia had been introduced, and in some cases, the trial judge accepted it as a basis for a ruling. I find this outrageous. We found, here's what they said, we found 15 trial court cases and 12 appellate court cases where Sharia was found to be applicable in the case at bar. The facts are the facts. Some judges are making decisions deferring to Sharia law even when those decisions conflict with constitutional provisions. This is, my message is, this has to stop. So let me get this straight.
So there's a courthouse in the United States, and there's a guy saying, Your Honor, the reason I beat my wife is she didn't have her burqa on. And the judge is saying, well, I understand precisely why. It says here in Sharia law that a woman should have her head covered, and if she doesn't, she's a harlot. I find in defense of the husband for beating his wife. Or is it not quite that graphic?
Well, first of all, let me give you the good part and then the bad part.
Okay.
I looked up cases in Connecticut to see if there were any such cases.
Yes.
I found 3 cases where people attempted to introduce Sharia. It's typically a divorce case.
Okay.
Has to do with that. That's the most obvious point of contact.
Okay.
Because the rules governing divorce are very different between Sharia and our law.
Okay.
In all 3 cases, the judges rejected it.
Yeah,
which
I
is
mean,
good.
You could,
Is,
you know, produce
but
a ham sandwich in your defense. It doesn't mean it.
Listen to this one.
Uh-huh.
A couple of years ago, there was a case in New Jersey. A Moroccan Muslim woman had come to New Jersey and living with her Moroccan Muslim man, so a foreign couple, probably married in Morocco.
Okay.
She wanted a divorce, she sought a restraining order, she was being beaten and raped over the course of several weeks by her husband. The judge held that the defendant could not be held responsible for the violent sexual assaults of his wife because he did not have the specific intent to sexually assault his wife and because his actions were consistent with his religious practices. And I can show you the places in there.
Yeah.
Well, this is New Jersey. One could say things about New Jersey, but nevertheless, this actually happened. Well, the appellate court got very angry about this and reversed it. But think about it for a minute. How long did it take to get to the appellate court?
Yeah.
I mean, and there are other cases where the appellate, as I said, there were 12 cases that these people who did the study found where appellate courts have allowed it to enter in.
Let me ask you.
We have a problem with people getting judges becoming confused.
Well, I would like to think. I mean, you know, there seems to be this infatuation of late in Washington and elsewhere with all things Europe. Europe is just enlightened, and that's the way we should be, and the government should have more control of our lives, and we should give 70, 80, maybe 90% of our income to the government because the government will take care of us. We need to be more French. I don't subscribe to that. But Dave Straight asked this question. What about the impact of Sharia law that you're seeing in the United Kingdom and in France? What have you found?
The United Kingdom already has either 65 or 85 arbitration courts that will handle Sharia law, and then if they come to a conclusion, it gets taken to the British court to be confirmed. Now, that sounds okay, right? Except, remember this, typically you have people who have immigrated and are living in groups, which we have here. You know, you're going to have the Polish quarter or the Irish quarter or whatever.
I have a theory about that. It has to do with a salad bowl and a melting pot, but go ahead.
But at any rate, what happens is, let's say you're a woman who is 22, and you entered into a marriage with your cousin that was arranged by your family, and it has not worked out so well. Maybe you came from Bangladesh to do it. That's not uncommon. Maybe your English isn't so hot. You don't have much education because they didn't really let you pursue it, and you don't really know anybody outside your community. So you have the option, of course, of going to a British court with your request for a divorce. But then you're urged by your family and your friends to go through the arbitration that's done by the imam or whoever it is, whoever it is that's running the court. I don't know the correct title. Well, under Sharia law, you have far fewer rights as a woman.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Are you really strong enough, and do you have enough ability to survive to say, no, I reject that. I'm going to get all my friends and family mad at me, but I'm going to go to a British court and get a proper divorce that protects my rights? That's a hard one. And then to assume that the British court isn't just going to rubber stamp stuff, but it's going to maybe take it apart. Good luck.
Yeah, I think
so that's the UK, and that is spreading rapidly.
I appreciate your tolerance and your wanting to be politically correct, but I think that there's something going on here within the Islamic and Muslim community regarding women, and there's this sense of we need to keep them under control. And there's this sense that it has to do with sexuality as well, that if an unmarried woman is somehow promiscuous, that it is an indictment of the entire family.
That's correct.
And that it's not just something that, oh, that woman has loose morals and isn't that terrible, but this puts a black cloud on the whole family. And the only way to lift that black cloud is to kill the woman. And you see some of these honor killings with, as you point out, some of the Pakistani or some of these other countries who have nationals that are living in the United States. There's a famous case down in Texas where the woman was run over or killed in a car, and it was recorded or something hideous like that. This kind of thing, I think, within the Islamic community has to be somehow regulated. And it's not just that, but it goes all the way to radical Islamic thinking that motivates different phases of terrorism. We saw the most graphic, of course, in 9/11. Every single one of these guys were motivated by a fatwa that came from an imam that said that you can kill the Satan, the great Satan, you can go there and kill innocent life, and in the end it's all okay because Muhammad or Allah told us to do this. Now that's not to say that terrible things haven't been done in other religions as well, because they have. But now you got your master's from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced. You see, you write. I mean, articles. I can't believe it. I saw the articles you wrote. Let me run this analogy by you and see if it sticks. Okay. In this country, we have this thing called the Ku Klux Klan. Right? And the Ku Klux Klan will claim some vestiges of Christianity. They'll say, oh, burning cross, we're knights in God's service, and everything else. They'll have these, sort of vestiges. But the Ku Klux Klan is resoundingly ostracized by all mainline Christian Orthodox churches. We say it's wrong. These lynchings that went on back in the 1800s and 1900s, it's wrong. We reject it out of hand. And I would think that somehow as well, like Al-Qaeda and some of these radical Islamic groups, under the umbrella of of that Islamic religion, should likewise be ostracized by that religion. But I don't see that happening. I don't see it happening. And we can't come in as infidels or Christians and say, oh, this is what you need. They need to clean up their own house.
That's true.
They need to, this concept of like the Fort Hood shooter, the Times Square bomber. This guy lived in Bridgeport, and he would get on the websites and get worked up, and the imam he had a fatwa to go kill people, and he drives down to Times Square to do this. I don't know. Is there any validity in that analogy that Christianity likewise has these radicals, but they're ostracized by the main body, not so much on the other side, or am I all wet?
No, I think the problem, and if you look at a place like Egypt, it's very clear. The problem is that radical Islam or Islamism or political Islam, whatever the different names are for it, is really you might call it a wolf in sheep's clothing, but what it is a political ideology that may say it's based on the 7th century Arabia, but it combines all kinds of elements of 20th century totalitarian thought and control. And it's very powerful. Right now, it's on a roll, it's on an ascendant. And I brought up Egypt. If you look at Egypt, the single biggest category of people who've been killed by these people are other Muslims.
And Muslim Brotherhood.
They have not, the Muslim Brotherhood has not, it has come to power now, but people are opposing it. They don't want this interpretation of this is a hijacking of a religion.
They didn't cash in Mubarak to have, Morsi or something like that? Become,
unfortunately,
some sort of theological demigod.
Unfortunately, that's where they are. And so they have, you're quite right, we can't...
Bring back Mubarak!
Well, we can't tell Muslims how to fix this problem. We can't, but I can tell you one thing we should not be doing. The U.S. government is helping Morsi.
With the F-16s or
Not
F-17s?
Not only. And we should not be doing that.
A couple billion a year or something like that?
I feel very strongly about that.
Well, that all goes back to Sadat and Begin and the Camp David Accord, and they said, hey, if you make peace with Israel, we're going to give you all this money for years and years and years.
No, I'm
so
not.
We're kind of locked
it's
in
not. It's not just that.
Yeah.
We're giving him tremendous diplomatic support.
Mm-hmm.
We're giving them a lot of political support, and that plays out vis-a-vis the other guys. I don't know. I should have brought it in, but there was a guy in Tahrir Square with this huge thing saying, "Obama, you are an idiot."
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what happened to him since he showed his thing, but there when. Hillary Clinton, when she was still Secretary of State, and she went, was it to Alexandria or Cairo, there were angry demonstrators around her car saying, you are supporting the wrong guys.
Yeah.
You should be supporting us. We're the ones that want liberty.
Yeah, let alone
I would say,
Israel that's had to put
I know
up with
from my
years.
experience that it can be hard to, particularly when there's a lot of turbulence in a country, it's hard to get it right.
Yeah.
But we can do better than we're doing. Trust me.
Yeah.
We really can.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, it's been a real eye-opener, and there's so much to it. That, like, you even talked about in one of your articles about the Methodist Church that's boycotting Israeli, goods or something like that. It really is it's just a sick soup of anti-Semitism and under the banner of tolerance, we're just going to okay all this stuff, and then the byproduct of all this is this grooming and these crimes against women. I really don't understand exactly what. I guess there's a sense of security and modesty, and that's all well and good from the female point of view. But what they're doing and what you see unfolding when the Sharia law rules a country, it's reprehensible. Anyways, contrast Christianity as a religion, love, compassion, forgiveness, mercy, and kindness. And Islam does tend to be controlled by hate, control, evil. Now, if you're within the Muslim community, I guess you could say, well, the majority aren't that way. We're really peace-loving and, oh, come on. But I don't know. The proof is in the pudding. It's not exactly what I'm saying.
For example, I spent 2 years in Bosnia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So
Why don't you go to like Hawaii or something?
I knew there was something wrong. I just knew I did something wrong.
Let's see. I got a brochure from Bosnia, Herzegovina. That seems like a nice, peaceful place. Yeah. Well, listen, will you come back? Because we'll give us 10 seconds real quick.
10 seconds real quick. I think that the number of good people is pretty constant across populations.
That's true.
So there are plenty of good Muslims who are loving, who are kind, who have mercy. Political systems matter.
Yeah.
Religious systems matter. And if one gets off on the wrong way, terrible things can happen.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in. Okay. I really appreciate it. And please go on the website. Hopefully we have her name up there as well. And we really appreciate you coming in. Listen, you've been on the Marty Heiser Show, where you always get the truth. Next week, we're going to look a little bit at a very touchy subject, school shootings. What's the best way to prevent them? What can we do to avoid them in the future? And we may have a psychologist that's going to be coming in on that. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week right here on the Marty Heiser Show, 9 to 10 p.m. Check your local listings. We're on 5 hours a week on prime time. Good night, and we'll see you next week.